Hey guys, before we jump in today's episode, a quick disclaimer. As we cover such a wide range of sensitive and deep topics, please keep in mind that the stories and insights shared today are based on personal journeys and individual interpretations. All statements are the personal views of the speaker, and each individual holds responsibility for their own views and their own path. We're here to explore these ideas together with an open mind, and we encourage everyone to listen with an open heart, but also to take personal responsibility for their own path and perspective. We're here to explore together, not to provide professional or universal. So, welcome to another episode of the Plus Jungle Show, Mayuran. Thank you for giving me this time because this is part two of our conversation. So, part one, we were just getting into the groove of getting in the main questions. And I think we ended at a place where you were talking about political satsang and how it's a one-way street where people should involve spirituality into politics, but not the other way around. So now getting into the little depth about it, like people who are not from Britain or they have no idea about politics, what's happening in Britain, could you just give a broader perspective about how do you look at the far right and the far left? And you can also use spirituality as an example, like from the Mahabharata or something, if you can kind of explain to people who know a little bit about spirituality but don't know much about the politics in Britain. So do you have any
Yeah,
examples?
so the political, it's a spectrum, isn't it? So you have the left on one side and then you have the right on the other. Now, left is usually typically about a small government, it's about a small state, it's about socio-economic welfare for the poor, the downtrodden. Often it's accompanied by a very open liberal stance on culture and identity and things like that. So that's from the kind of left of politics. And on the right, it's more about understanding, say, a value for tradition, a small state government, free market economics, a focus on the individual and responsibility of the individual. All that's the kind of major kind of axis of difference in the left and right of politics. And I would say, look, there's legitimacy to both sides of that, that's for sure. And it depends on the nature, where the country, in the context of the situation. Do you steer more to the left? Do you steer more to the right? Depending on what you see going on in front of you. I don't think you need to be so rigidly dogmatic if you're just left of center, just right of center. But I think at the moment, what's happening in the UK, and I think much of the Western world, America as well, is that we're getting a radical left situation coming up. And that's where I think has produced a very kind of massive decline, especially in Europe and especially in Britain, where there is an excessive focus on massive government, massive spending, big tax, huge welfare state, where very small working population paying for a very large number of people who are not working. And then the most important thing I would say is open borders, mass immigration, not just immigration, but mass immigration, huge numbers of people coming in a short space of time, and therefore changing the cultural dynamic and identity of the country in a very sharp way in a very short space of time. And those are the issues that we're facing at the moment in Britain. So for me personally, in response to the radical left, I think the stance at the moment is definitely that we go towards the centre right, to try and pull things back to a measured situation as it stands, in the hope for some kind of stability in the country and prosperity.
Right. So we, I definitely would be getting in more into the immigration aspect of this, but as you were just saying that it's not about going at one side, like to left or right. It's probably like creating a balance between this, depending on the context of the situation. Um, could you give me any example from spirituality? Since we were talking about spirituality, could you give me an
Yeah.
example that you think maybe from Mahabharata or any other Shastra where you have read or you have got to know about where you thought this was also happening previously in the past and then we could maneuver over how they kind of tackled with it or
Yeah, so
what
there's
they
something
saw.
called this term called samskara. Samskara is, if I loosely translate into English, is basically the psychological impression. That's how I describe what samskara, the word in Sanskrit, means. And if you look at the psychological, the samskaras of the radical left, I think it's and the conservative right. You have to understand what these samskaras are, and then you can understand it in relation to spirituality. Now, I often say this, like when, especially, obviously, we were talking last time a lot about Guruji and so on. I think when people come to the spiritual path and they're seeking, it's good to have a center left mentality, the samskaras of the center left. That's openness. That's being let's say, non-judgmental, not too rigidly dogmatic, being very open in your stance. That left mentality, that left samskara, those samskaras are useful. As you actually get initiated onto a path, and as you actually kind of like formally adopt an actual clear path with a clear tradition, often you need to, I would say, shift the samskara situation to a more conservative mindset, because you need to understand where your borders are. You need to understand with clarity what your path is, who you are, what you are not, what is feeding into your path and helping you grow, nourish your path, and what is against your path. You should be very clear about that. And this is where you start to adopt a more conservative mindset. So that's one thing I would bring up in terms of spirituality. But I'm going to make the case that God is a conservative, right? And I think some people might get a little bit triggered by that, but I
also
believe
got
God.
it right now. What are you talking about?
Because look, what do the Upanishads say? The Upanishads say that the Lord Sri Hari Narayana is Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Amalam, Anandam. Like, so he is existence, he is consciousness, he is infinity, he is purity, and he is Anandam, he is love, right? He is bliss, he is love. But the point of the matter is, God is existence. And one fundamental difference, I really want, if I could give a clear message to your audience, it's that the radical left, and I'm talking about the radical left here, not just the center left, the radical left, they don't want to accept reality as it is. They don't want to accept human nature as it is. And so what they intend to do, the radical left, so often is bypass reality, bypass truth, bypass satyam, and then start implementing a very idealistic understanding, a utopian understanding of what love is. And I think that's the samskara of the radical left. The samskara of the conservative is to first understand what is existence. How does reality work? How does the economic market work? How does human behavior work? What is realistic? What is pragmatic? And in the context of that, implement love in the context of reality, right? Whereas the radical left want to actually bulldoze reality and say it's irrelevant, and we can just have our way because we are righteous and we are good and we want to love everyone and we don't care what happens. We just want to make it happen. And it's this kind of what you find is the radical left, its understanding of love is not rooted in truth, it's rooted in arrogance. Whereas the conservative understanding of love is first understand how reality works, then implement love. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 11, he says, when Arjuna asks, who are you, after seeing this Vishwarupa cosmic form, he asks, who are you? Krishna says, Kalosmi Lokakshekrit. I am time. I am destiny. I am the great destroyer of worlds. That's what he says. So Krishna is saying that I am the very flow of life. And so a conservative mentality is to understand Krishna as life, as the dynamic, how life actually moves and operates, and then implement love. Whereas the radical left ignore Krishna as he is and seek to impose their arrogant, idealistic, utopian understanding of love. And that's why everything the radical left touches fails. And it's not rooted in love. I'll give you an example of in the Bhagavatam, there is a story of Nrsingadev, right? Lord Narasimha. I don't know do you know the story?
No, but I'll just pause you here for a minute,
Yeah.
because you were just saying that people from the far left ignore Krishna as it is.
Yeah.
Are we just sticking to Krishna as this is just an example we are using, or this is just that your belief is that for them they have to
look at Lord Krishna, like Lord Krishna is the supreme. Is it what we are talking about here? Or are you trying to imply that? Or
No,
you're just
I'm not.
using
Look,
Krishna as an example
I'm
from the
using
Mahabharata?
Krishna as being the supreme truth, right? So if you're Christian, you'll see him as Christ, the Father in heaven, as you like, right? But
Right.
Krishna, given that you're a Hindu, I'm a Hindu, and we're talking the Hindu context, Krishna is the supreme truth. So it's the radical. I'll give you an example. Um, is that there's it just recently our government is going very, very left. It's almost socialist. The socialist understanding is that the poor should be fed, the poor should be taken care of, the poor should be looked after by the state. And in the process, and that's a noble understanding, that's a noble intention. I agree with that. Everyone agrees with that. But the process in which they want to go about doing it is huge amounts of taxation on a small number of people who are working. What happens? The people who are working become, feel a sense of injustice. And as a result of that, they work less. And as a result of that, you get less tax revenue in. And a lot of these people end up just not working at all and thinking, do you know what? There's so much benefits from the state that is being given out by
Right.
this big state. I'm going to claim benefits. So they stop working. As they stop working, you get less tax revenue coming in. As you get less tax coming in, you can't fund the state. You can't fund the poor. And as a result of that, the rich become poorer and poorer and poorer. And eventually the poor, they reach the status of the poor, and then even the poor become poorer.
Poor,
And that
yeah.
is how a socialist government runs out of other people's money, right? So in the name of righteousness, in the name of compassion, what ends up happening is you destroy everything. And
Basically
this is what I
ignoring the
mean.
reality, yeah. Ignoring the reality.
Exactly, ignoring the reality.
Reality,
And
yeah.
another contentious example that the radical left love to do is, like, for example, the trans debate, right? I don't know how much it has hit India on the headlines as such, but
Yeah, it has been hitting India a lot before as well.
right.
Yeah.
So I've got no problem with any individual who identifies as a man, let's say a biological man who identifies as a woman, wants to live their life as a woman, changes their name, dresses as a woman. No problem for me. But the radical left and the trans activists want to actually say that a biological man is a woman, literally is a woman. And they demand that the Supreme Court, that all legislation, that all hospitals, healthcare, schools, all of our language adapts and changes to say that a biological man, if they identify as a woman,
Women,
is actually a woman,
women.
right? So what we're seeing there is another example of the samskara of let's ignore reality. I feel a certain way, and let this manifest. Tadastu, let this manifest. And I would say that, to me, that is a point of arrogance. For example, that example I talked about, how a biological man can identify as a woman. What are they asking for? These trans activists are saying that my subjective reality, how I feel, should trump the objective world we see. The whole objective world has to change depending on how I feel.
Subjective, yeah, exactly, yeah. And then, so basically,
Yeah.
you're actually, in a way, just trying to impose your thoughts, and the others have to just adapt to that. And then, in the name of liberal mindset, like, okay, this is a liberal mindset, but the others have to pay the price for it because they have to, as you were saying, adapt everything as per they feel they are. So let's say a
Yeah.
man feeling that they're a woman, then others around them need to address them more, like as you said, the healthcare, and everybody has to move around that the way they feel, which is
I mean,
actually
just
not
just to go
liberal.
back on that principle, the principle, like, for example, when, in the 60s, women used to campaign for the vote. The principle behind that was the woman wanted equal opportunity as a man. That's a great principle. The gay rights movement was simply that the principle behind the gay rights movement was to say, I want to be in love with whatever partner I want to be in love with, and I want the state out of my life. That's a great principle. What the trans activists try and say is, oh, it's just it's just part of the progression of women's rights, gay rights, now trans rights. No, the trans situation is what I said before. It is, the principle is not about let's leave me alone. It's about you must all change depending on how I feel.
I feel,
And
yeah.
it's a very different principle.
Exactly. It's not for themselves. So basically, it's not a win-win situation in a way where everybody else has also benefited from that. So as you were saying earlier, it was just about a man and a woman. That was fine because we understand that, and that's great. Even I agree with that. But then when they try to impose their mindset on others in a way where everybody has to change their core idea or the core behavior that they do towards them, then that becomes a problem. And this is again another reality which they kind of ignore, I would say. So yeah, you were using an example after the Krishna's example, and I kind of pause you there. So you would like to mention what you were trying to say about
Yeah,
another
because
story?
I do believe that this has some evidence in Shastra as well. Like, for example, the Bhagavatam talks about the Lord Narasimha, the story, and I'll very, very quickly summarize it. There was a demon called Hiranyakashipu, right? And he wanted immortality. And then he went to Brahma and he got a blessing because Brahma says to him, I can't give you immortality. I'm not the supreme truth, right? Important statement. I'm not the
Right,
supreme truth. I'm not reality. I'm not Krishna, right? But I can give you a boon that says you can't be killed by any man or beast during the day or during the night, inside or outside any building, on the earth or in the sky, by anything dead or alive. So Hiranyakashipu gets this amazing boon from Brahma and thinks he has conquered reality. So he sets himself up as God. I am God. And he sits on the throne and makes all the devas bow down to him and worship him, Om Hiranyakashipu Namaha, and so on. He takes the place of Krishna. He takes the place of Harinarayana, right? And
right,
he dictates what's going on. And then eventually his son is a great devotee, Prahlad is a great devotee of the Lord. And when his life becomes threatened, that is when Nrsingadev, Narayana, Krishna appears out of the pillar, because he asks, where is he? And he bursts out of the pillar. He's neither man nor beast. He kills him on the twilight hour, which is neither day nor night. He puts him on his lap, which is neither on the earth or in the
in the
sky.
sky,
And he
yeah.
kills him with his nails, which are neither dead nor alive. So he satisfies the boon and still kills Hiranyakashipu. And what that confrontation shows us very briefly is that the arrogance, the ahamkara, the ego wants to always conquer reality. It always wants to bulldoze its way on reality and say, this is how I feel. This is what I believe is right. And I don't care what happens. This is what must happen. And the Shingadev is the natural response of reality, of the Lord, of the divine, to correct the ahamkara. And this is why I say, with socialism, with the radical left, with the communist mentality, that samskara, whenever it confronts reality, it always ends up in destruction. It always ends up in calamity and disaster. And because it doesn't honor reality, it seeks to conquer reality. It has the Hiranyakashipu mindset. And that's what I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I think that's a great example because I just watched the movie very recently, which was just out on
Ah,
Netflix, and superbly animated, by the way. Have you watched that movie? Even though you know the story
I've been
already.
told to watch it, and my response
Yeah.
was always, "I know what happens." And then, then someone said,
Yeah.
"Yes, I know, but it's still well animated, as you said." So it's on my to-do list, I think, to eventually get around to watching it.
Yeah, that was a great way for me to watch that story again, even though I knew the story. But yeah, of course, it makes a lot of difference when you watch it with such great animation. So yeah, I mean, I do understand where you're coming from, and now I understand what you mean by God is conservative. Um, but in a way, when people hear these how do you justify talking about spirituality? Because I think, as you were saying that earlier when we were talking the part one, where you said that, every political party or thoughts come from a spiritual background in a way. If I'm correct,
Yeah,
if I'm wrong, just
yeah.
correct me. So how do you justify that with people who say that, oh, but he's talking about Hinduism or he's talking about Christianity, and then you know how the ears get alerted when they hear these things about religion and stuff like that. And how do you justify or how do you balance the act of not, coming across as someone who's completely a pro-Hinduist, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I would say to you, I don't openly preach Hinduism in the political sphere. And I do that very deliberately, but I'm very clear about the principles that underlie the spiritual principles of Vaishnavism and Hinduism in general. And I articulate that through a political wrapping paper, let's say, so that people can more easily digest it in that sense. But I think that if you start bringing up Bhagavad Gita like I'm talking very openly with you here, but if I were to do this on a political stage, or say on Sky News Australia, which I sometimes go on, or Talk TV, I think it would be way too much. And I think I also you also need to be sensitive here, and this is a much larger point. The cultural identity of this country, of Britain, is being eroded away massively.
Mm-hmm.
I would say this is not a time for a politician, a Hindu politician, to start preaching openly the Bhagavad Gita and so on. I would say this, what I often do, believe it or not, is I actually, if anything, I preach the gospel. I try and promote Christianity. And people will say to me, oh, well, what's that about? You're not a Christian. And I openly say on media shows, I'm not a Christian, but it will give me tremendous joy to see the benches of the churches filled with people praising Christ. It will give me tremendous joy for vicars and priests to go out and preach the gospel proudly en masse, because Britain severely needs a spiritual religious foundation, and it should be Christianity, because that is what the constitution and the democratic whole landscape of the country has emerged from. It's come from Christianity. So I want to see Christianity promoted. And I don't see a contradiction here between Christianity and Bhakti and Vaishnavism. I mean, like chapter, when Krishna, one of his closing statements in chapter 18 is, abandon everything, surrender unto me. I will take care of your sins. I will liberate you. Have no fear. Yeah, it's a famous verse.
I know that. Yeah.
Yes. So that verse is exactly Christian doctrine, right? It's exactly Christian doctrine. And I look at Christ as an avatar of Sri Hari Narayana. I look at him as an avatar of Krishna. So I can easily preach the gospel not being a Christian. I can easily want to see Christianity promoted. And I think it's more healthy for the country that Christianity and that foundation is embedded, rather than a Hindu politician coming in and saying, you know, you should be reading the Upanishads, you should be reading Bhagavatam and so on. I don't think now is the time for that. I don't think it's appropriate given the situation we're in.
Right. The experience that I've got from people, and what feedback I get from my Western friends, is that they normally, as you were saying, that you would be happy to see the benches filled in the churches with people. What I always get the feedback from them is that they run away from anything that is kind of imposed on them. Like they talk about people trying to convert people into Christianity, or telling them when to come, like you have to come to the church. Like, I think what I have experienced is my personal experience. This could be different for somebody else, but I'm talking from my personal experiences, that in Hinduism, and I'm not trying to make some kind of a discussion or debate about Christianity and Hinduism. What I'm trying to say is that in Hinduism, I don't see that kind of pressure that you have to go to the temple, or you should do this, or you should believe in this god or that god. Do you think that is a problem when it comes to people running away from Christianity or not going to the churches? Do you think that is also some issue that should be addressed? That, you know, people shouldn't be pressured about a religion or a religious ritual or something like that? Do you think that should be?
Yeah, so I would say, obviously, pressurizing and so on is going to deter people. That's just a natural reaction. But I think maybe from what I gather from what you're saying is the conversion aspect. Look, if you're talking about British colonialism in India and converting the Hindu masses, yeah, that's a problem. That's a real problem, right? To kind of obliterate a culture and a religious identity, that's a real problem in that context. But the message of the Mahabharata is that Dharma is subtle, sukshma, right? It's a debate about Dharma. And I would say that Dharma in 2025, with Britain, which has had mass immigration, which has losing its cultural identity, where there is lack of social cohesion, where people just don't know how to build their society together, where there's a sense of belonging and familiarity. The time now is to promote Christianity as a spiritual foundation, to unite people and to resurrect what made Britain great once upon a time. And I think that is the calling of the time that we are in. And so I am not really worried about, you know, are priests going to go around converting people or converting Hindus? I think that threat doesn't exist. I think, well, I'm more concerned about Christianity being obliterated out of existence rather than Christianity coming and converting Hindus or Muslims or any other people. I want to see Christianity grow in Britain. I want to see that. I would be the happiest person if I saw Christianity grow, and because that is the need of the time. Like I said, this isn't the colonial era in India that we need to be worried about mass
No, it's
conversion.
no, I wasn't just pointing at it was just one of the aspects that I was using as conversion, but it was not the entire core of the my question. My question was basically, what should Christians do in a way, or as you said, that this is not the time for Britain to run away from that. It should be actually getting into more into the Christianity and making the core aspect of its growth or the vehicle for that. What should they do so that people, kind of start adapting that or adopting that
Yeah.
way?
So yeah, good question. We have something called the Church of England, right? Which is, a Protestant church, Anglican church, and they have completely failed the British public and the Christian population in this country because all they do, they've effectively, like all public institutions, become they don't. I don't feel like they worship Christ. They worship the religion of woke. Their radical left ideology. It's all about, like I said, the very gay rights, trans rights, and it's all okay, fine. This stuff is not really important. It's not really the primary remit of the Church of England. It should be preaching the gospel, preaching the message of Christ, unashamedly stepping out and giving them the love of Christ and the teachings of Christ. I feel like that hasn't happened. Instead, they've been hijacked by all these kind of social cultural issues and neglected their fundamental duty. So if what I want to see from Christians is unapologetically standing up and preaching the gospel. People who are in high office, who are in, people who people look up to as, people, good examples and high profiles, they should be preaching the gospel. Like America has a kind of Christian nationalism, like politics and Christianity is very much together. You see it in a Trump administration as well, in the Republican Party. I'm not so sure that would work in Britain because we're different in Britain. But I do think nonetheless, people are searching. When you have a decline in social cohesion and you don't know who you are in terms of a national identity as a society, I think people become increasingly, who am I? They're searching for something solid. And that's where the Church of England in particular should be rescuing and filling that gap. But I don't feel like they're doing it. So it's really about being unashamedly, unapologetically standing with Christ and preaching the gospel.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think preaching these things and telling the people about the love of God and giving the message of God in a way which is not wokeism, where you said it shouldn't be that, because again, that becomes something where they are not actually in a way accepting the truth or reality, which becomes another debate, or it's a debatable aspect of things. So I think if they just basically go back to the basics and just teach the basics of Christianity, or the message that Christianity gives out in the name of God, that I think that could help people get back to filling up the churches and, kind of, as you said, making the core of Britain or politics. I think because that's the basis of politics, that's what you believe in, because I think that's what we started from, that the basis of any political party or any political thought has something to do with spirituality,
Yeah.
if I'm right.
I mean, we've had two bills passed in the Parliament recently. One's called the assisted dying bill, and one's the abortion bill. And they both have, I think, fundamentally changed the country. One's still, the assisted dying bill still going through, but it's basically about how the state could kill off people who want it. So an abortion is about being allowed to abort almost up to birth, right? And so these bills, these are very strange and radical bills that are being passed through Parliament. And what it shows for is the fact that they're getting so much traction and almost going to become law, like state-sponsored suicide, effectively, is what the assisted dying bill is. Is a sign that we have become unanchored from our religion and our idea of sanctity of life. And this is what I mean. When you lose the religious, spiritual foundation of a country, you are now in no man's land. Anything becomes up for grabs. If you don't have the theological foundation of that life is precious, that you're made in the image of God, or that in Hindu context, the Atma is a part of God. It is of the nature of God. The essence of God is the Atma. If you don't have that understanding, then you're quite happy to go down the route of these bills, of this abortion bill and this assisted dying bill as well. And I think what these two acts being passed through Parliament is symptomatic of a country that has lost its way theologically.
Yeah, I think those are some great points that you've made here, especially talking about in the context of spirituality and politics, because I think they both are. I mean, it's a very thin line where you walk on this, because this could be very easily misunderstood or taken in the other way. You know what I mean? Like when you talk about spirituality and politics together, it's normally not kind of appreciated, I would say. I think.
Yeah, no, I would look. For example, I know, Guruji and the Lord, God is above politics. God is above Prakriti, and people will say politics is of Prakriti, is of the material world. So therefore, why are you joining up the transcendent reality with Prakriti in this way? And the reason why I would defend what I'm saying is because it goes back to the earlier points. When you're on a spiritual path, there are certain samskaras that you need to pursue a spiritual path, right? And if you don't imbibe those samskaras, then what inevitably happens is you just either end up with a very shallow version of spirituality or a very deluded version of spirituality. And so the samskaras are very important on the spiritual path, even though the goal of spirituality is above the samskaras themselves, right? And so the samskaras on the political sphere are also the same. You need the same samskaras. Another classic example is the radical left, and I keep using the word radical as opposed to center left because I want to make that distinction, is that the radical left, they don't believe in tapasya. They don't believe in tapasya. Tapasya means austerity, right? And Sanatana Dharma is always founded on tapasya. You look at all the stories of the rishis, the saints, and so on. They were austere. They were disciplined. They made sacrifices. They worked incredibly hard. Tapa means heat. They generated heat to win over the affection and grace of the Lord so that they could advance spiritually and become closer to him, right? The radical left, believe that they should just conquer. They should just get what they want. Why can't the poor just get what they want tomorrow? Because if you go down that route, you destroy everything, as I said earlier, right? Being center
The whole
right,
system
conservative,
collapses if you do that.
exactly. Even Guruji, right? The Guru, as you know, right? The Guru is a hard taskmaster, right? The Guru is somebody, he doesn't indulge you in self-pity. He doesn't indulge you in like my narratives of I'm pity me, I'm so fallen, he will say to you, get up, work hard, you go through terrible times, you come out, you become resilient, and through that resilience, you expand, you grow, and you become better and better, right? And the Guru will test you. Often he will test you very, very sharply. And so being with a spiritual master, tapasya, without this notion of tapasya, I mean, I don't know how you would advance forward in your own spirituality. That is how reality works. Satyam Brahma, truth is God. Kalosmi, I am destiny, Krishna says. Reality works through tapasya. The radical left do not want to enter into tapasya. They want a shortcut route to bypass the tapasya, bypass reality, so that through arrogance, they can implement what they want. Because my feelings are more important than reality. That is the samskara of the radical left. And that's why I make the case that God is a conservative.
It's not basically black and white. It's basically there is an extreme left and there is a center left. I get your point, because you are not completely against left. It's what you're against of is a certain mindset which is very extreme towards the left.
Yeah.
I think it's a great point, but can you explain in some way if there is an example that you can give from Christianity? Because you use the word tapasya, which is something which is a very known word in the Hindu samskara, or I would say in the Indian samskara. I don't know if it's known anywhere else, but this is a word which comes out of Sanskrit as well, and it's basically, as you said, tapa means burning in that. So do you think there's anything that in Christianity which can relate to the same word? Is there somewhere we can, for the people of who don't
I
know?
can't be sure that there's a sense of a word as such, but you look at something like Lent, right? I don't know if you know, as approaching Easter, what happens? Most Christians will sacrifice something, right? They perform
Right.
some kind of yagna sacrifice. Tapasya is linked to yagna, right?
Uh-huh.
In a metaphorical sense.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
sacrifice, I won't eat chocolate, I won't drink during this period. Because they look at Jesus in the desert, right? When he made that sacrifice, he performed tapasya. If you look at the saints, especially in the Orthodox tradition, they're always performing tapasya. And the idea of tapasya is I sacrifice the pleasures and the conveniences of the material world so that I can become more internalized and I can grow for a higher purpose. So it's sacrifice for a higher purpose. That is what tapasya means. And it's about building resilience and building your muscle, your spiritual muscles, by not indulging yourself recklessly in the material world. Now, tapasya can go too far, and Krishna talks about extremes of tapasya and so on. But the reality is you need a degree of tapasya to achieve anything meaningful in life. Anything that's sustainable is achieved through tapasya. It's not just handed to you on a plate. And again, that's the point that I think Christians will understand that through Jesus and the saints. But the radical left, as I said, doesn't.
Yeah, because just to answer people, I understand everything what you've just said about tapasya. I know much deeper things about tapasya as well. I don't want to get into that because this will otherwise go into another direction, this whole conversation. So basically, to the people who would or question you, like, okay, we've got this world, we've got this life, and God has sent me into this life. Why am I supposed to do tapasya? I mean, I should just get what like what's around me, or why am I supposed to? Could you say something to those people? Like, why am I supposed to go through and sacrifice something? I just want to enjoy life. I'm getting what I get. I have to get it, and I've been sent to this world as a child, and I just have to enjoy. So what? Why should I sacrifice? What is the meaning behind sacrifice for them?
The meaning behind sacrifice, I mean, the question of why you have to sacrifice is a very it's almost an impossible, because you're also almost asking, why does reality work like this? And you're basically asking, why does God think like this? Right? That's basically, why is God like this? Is really what you're asking. But I would say that is a question of the ahamkara, right? That is a question that when you feel like you're entitled, and like, especially I see a radical left again, is this sense of my rights, it's my right, but no, and it's been said many times by many commentators, everyone likes to talk about rights, but no one likes to talk about responsibility.
Exactly.
Right?
This is what I want to talk to you about, because this is the difference. There is a difference between entitlement and responsibility. Nobody wants to take the responsibility, but everybody wants to be entitled. And this is why I was asking this question. I was just challenging this question because I think I know what you mean by, the question itself is like asking, why is this reality? Like, what is reality? But there are people who have these kind of questions. I mean, trust me, there are some people who really feel that they're entitled and they're not responsible.
But shall I tell you where it comes from? It comes from a lack of humility. Because when you are humble, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, I said this to you last time in a previous episode, I think, that those who take from their gods without offering back is verily a thief, right? When we are humble, we have a natural sense of gratitude. And with gratitude, we have a natural sense of responsibility because we treasure what has been given to us and we naturally want to perform seva. We naturally want to be of service. We naturally want to give back. So the humility naturally is driven towards sacrifice and tapasya.
Exactly.
Naturally.
Yeah.
Whereas the ahamkara is naturally driven towards conquering and asking the question, why can't I have this? Right? And so this is the thing, the saints, they don't ask, why is it like this? They fully embrace and celebrate the nature of reality because they understand Satyam Brahma, existence is God. So by embracing reality, they embrace God and they want to serve God by serving reality. And they perform tapasya as part of their service. It's natural. It's absolutely natural. And so this is why I say, when people like, it comes back to why I'm on the center right of politics. It's because it's these samskaras that I recognize in our tradition through my guru that naturally propels me towards center right of politics, because these are where these samskaras are most visibly found. And if you go
Exactly.
to the radical left, they are actually in direct opposition to these samskaras that are so necessary for the spiritual path.
That's excellent. The reason is because we're talking about Guruji. You just brought in Guruji in between a bit, and I was just going to tell you that this is exactly the experience that I have got from, let's say, my samskara from childhood when I've been through my Guruji, and the basis of my Guruji was always seva, which is service, and bhajan, which is of course for the soul, the soul is always hungry for love, and I think bhajans are a way of kind of making that relation with you and God or you and Guru very easily attainable. Like I think it's a vehicle that is just makes it more easier for you to connect with your Guru, I would say, bhajans. And then the other thing was bhojan, basically, which is feeding the hungry and feeding yourself as well, because that's a necessity. So I think service and seva, when you do it, or any kind of seva, it just makes you humble. And that's what a guru normally would choose that path to I mean, there are other ways also a guru does things, which is obviously a lot of depth into that. But I think service and seva is a way of attaining that humility. Because I think when you are not humble, you are like a little baby, you're trying to be very cranky, you're trying to be very demanding, or this is why I'm not getting this or why I'm not getting that. But when you start doing seva, I think it it kind of sows in the seed of humility, and it starts growing and growing as you keep doing the seva, I think. Um, talking when as we're talking about spirituality and politics, I just want to ask you if today, Arjuna came and told you that, my battlefield is modern politics, immigration, culture, identity, and all these things that we've been talking about. What guidance from the Gita would you give him, or in a way to the people?
Um, I think we've touched on most of the major arguments about the nature of understanding reality. I mean, politics is very much a Kurukshetra. It is. I mean, it's brutal. It's
Right.
absolutely brutal. The kind of personal attacks, even threats that you get, and the criticisms from, I'm I'm Sri Lankan Tamil heritage in Britain, on the centre right of politics. But if you go to the very far right of politics, you get ethno-nationalists who are, I would say, probably the most critical of me, because they see me as someone pretending to be British and who shouldn't be here anyway. And so they want to sort of deport me and my family and whatever it is. And so you have to have this very strong sense of purpose and karma yoga, which is a central feature of the Bhagavad Gita, in a sense like you are acting for that higher purpose. You are acting from a nature of service, from a nature of sacrifice. And once you are clear about the fundamental principles of what you want to achieve, and you are very secure in your principles, then you become resilient and you have the
Mhm.
courage, the armor to deal with the kind of multiple attacks that you get from all over the spectrum on the political sphere. But I would say it's simply that seva is the fundamental message of the Gita through Karma Yoga and Bhakti. And this is my Guru Seva, my Narayana Seva, is through the political realm. So if you can understand that, then I
Mhm.
think you can move forward in politics in a respectable way.
Amazing. I think that's a great point, because I mean, there are a lot of things that we've been speaking about, and one thing that we have been trying to nibble through, but we have not touched clearly, is about immigration. The problem that the West is actually facing right now is about immigration. And shifting gears here exactly into immigration, what is your take on that, and how do you kind of, so there is a thin line between kind of protecting one's country's culture and without slipping into hatred or dehumanization. So how do you kind of take care of that, and talking about in
Yeah,
context of immigration, because I think that's huge right now.
it is the defining issue of our time, because immigration, the economy can go up and down. That's fine. Public institutions can rise and fall. That happens. But once you lose the people, the cultural identity of a country, you have essentially lost the soul of a country forever. It is never the same again. And so this is the reason why the immigration is such a huge thing. Now, my parents came to Britain in sort of 1978, 1979. Net immigration, that's the difference between those coming and going, was in 1980 was negative. So there are more people leaving the country than even coming in some of those years. And in those other years, it was around 10,000, 20,000 people coming. Difference between those coming and going was about 10, 20,000 coming in. So immigration was at that level. In 2023, this is net immigration. Difference between those coming and going was 1 million coming in. So not 1 million coming in total. The difference between those coming and going is 1 million coming in. And these are, and then the thing is, it's not just the numbers. The numbers are huge. They're like biblical numbers, right? Absolutely crazy numbers. And then it's not just the numbers, it's where they're coming from. Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, China, Syria. These are not Anglosphere countries or even European countries which have a cultural alignment towards Britain. They are often countries from the Middle East, Islamic countries. They are very different cultures, very different languages, very different etiquettes. Such a large number of people coming into the country in such a short space of time effectively breaks the country. And what we're finding is London is now around less than 30%, maybe 29% British white, right? The capital city of the United Kingdom of Britain is 29% British white. If I go to parts of Bradford in the Midlands, 75% Pakistani. Parts of Leicester in the Midlands again, 75% Indian. Tower Hamlets, so this is parts of London, almost 80, 90% Muslim, right? What we are seeing is not a melting pot of lots of cultures coming together or lots of people coming together and assimilating into one culture. What we're getting is an organic apartheid, like in South Africa. The country has been carved up based on ethnicity, based on religious grounds and nationality. So you have a Pakistani area, Indian area, a white British area here. We are divided, we are fragmented. And if that carries on, that creates alienation. And what happens is eventually through alienation, you're going to get civil unrest. Because if I don't understand you and you don't understand me, and we are strangers, there's going to be issues, massive issues. And that is what is building and building and building in this country. We cannot exist like this. And the immigration numbers have to be halted. And I would say even reversed, not just halted, but reversed.
And how do you think that is possible without with being delicate on not becoming dehumanization and things like where you're not really becoming the far right instead of being the center right?
So the first thing is you have to have a political party that is clear about British identity. What does it mean to be British? So you have to start from that understanding. And I would say it's about a gratitude for the inherited history that has built up into Britain. It is an appreciation and a gratitude. This comes back to what we were talking about before in terms of spirituality. The gratitude of how is it that we have this parliament here? How is it that we have this sense of democracy here, the rule of law? How is it? It's such a wonderful country. And you must have that deep appreciation, and then you must assimilate into that understanding of the cultural identity of the country. And you need a political party that firmly understands this. And then you need to understand that you need to have policies in place that always puts the British citizen first, because that's not what's happening at the moment. At the moment, we actually have an international welfare state. Where benefits are being given not just to British nationals who are not working. And it's bad enough if someone's not working and they could work, but they're getting benefits. That's bad. But if they're not working and they could work and they're not even a British citizen, and they're getting benefits, that's a gross injustice to the British citizen who is working and paying tax, right? So all of these things need to be put into place to put the British citizen first. And I would say, and one of our policies is to completely stop all kind of welfare to foreign nationals. And then that sets a precedent to say, look, if you come to this country, that's fine, but you have to work, you have to pay taxes, and you have to assimilate into this country. Now, what Donald Trump, I don't know if you've been following the news recently, Donald Trump is saying he's going to put a ban on certain countries, right? Because there was an Afghan who shot one of his guards, and so two of his guards actually. And he immediately had a press conference and said, we have a problem with immigration coming from certain cultures and certain countries. Now, the problem is this: you talked about dehumanization. I agree with you. This is a problem. This is, it's very easy to stray into demonizing the individual.
Correct.
But we must draw a distinction between demonizing the individual and a policy that needs to be implemented at a macro national level. Right. If in Afghanistan it is normal for, let's say, child marriage, or for women to be treated as third-class citizens, or it's a high conflict zone like in Sudan or somewhere like that. If you have large numbers of young men coming into the country, especially, you are inevitably importing some of that culture. Does it mean that all Afghans are bad? No. And this is where the dehumanization is important. There may be some amazing Afghan individuals, Hindus or Muslims or whatever, it doesn't matter, right? But at the end of the day, if something is normalized in a culture, in a country, and you have large numbers of people coming into this country, they are going to bring that culture into this country. And it's going to affect the cultural makeup of this country. The age of consent in Iraq is 9 years old. The age of sexual consent in Iraq is 9 years old. Yeah. If you have large numbers of men coming from Iraq to Britain, and then they live next to primary schools, which is what's happening right now, right? And they are put next to primary schools where they're young girls who have their school uniform dressed and they're wearing skirts and they're 10, 11 years old. You're going to get problems because they're used to a certain culture. Does it mean all Iraqis are bad? No. But when you're dealing with macro policies at a national level involving millions of people, you have to start thinking in general terms at what is normal for a country, and then start looking at what is normal for us, and then making policies that sort out the differences.
Exactly. That reminds me of, I can't remember the name of the German chancellor who was earlier, was way long back.
Angela Merkel.
No, there was another one who spoke about the same thing which you just said, that it becomes a problem only when there is a complete difference in the basic ideology or the way things are done in the other countries and how people come from that country. And I can't remember the name, but I will quickly try to remember that name, or maybe put it in the show notes later for people who would be interested to know the name. So is there a way where you could talk about where people can integrate? Or let's say you just mentioned that there were 1 million people who came in, and this was the extras who came in and in 2023. Is there a way to kind of like, I don't think you can send or deport everyone right now. Is there a way that the politics can do something where they can integrate these people in a better way, or kind of have some kind of like taking them hand to hand and trying to get them acknowledging the culture, or some things which can be done at the basis?
So look, I want to make the point that if you're an Afghan coming from in 1978, I mean, Afghanistan was very different in that time, I believe, as well, as was Iran. They're very secular, modern almost. And right. If you have had a person coming to Britain during that time, I would have no problem with that, because we had a stable culture for them to integrate into, and there was just a small number of people coming in. They're forced to integrate. My parents were forced to integrate. They had no choice, because there wasn't a huge amounts of. But if a Pakistani comes to Bradford, where there are 75% Pakistanis, they're not going to integrate. So the answer to your question is this: how do you, like, step by step give them, like, I don't know, a leaflet, or coach them into
Yeah, I
integrating
mean,
or
it's
something
difficult.
like that.
I'm just
Yeah,
trying to get to the.
my answer to that is you simply cannot. You cannot. Because the situation has got so extreme and got so out of control that we're beyond the stage of talking about this kind of level of integration. It doesn't work. So what we now need to talk about is talk about deportations. We need to talk about and you know the word mass deportations. When we used to say this, just even a year and a half ago in Britain, if a politician went out and said we're going to perform mass deportations, everyone was like, oh, terrible, far right policy, extremist.
Right.
Now, if you look at the polling, most of the country want mass deportations, right? And this just shows you how quickly things are going. And it's also an alarm. It is also a siren to show us that if we do not get on top of this immigration situation now, there will be civil war in this country. I'm not being alarmist when I say this. There have been many academics, or at least a number of academics, who have come out on record and said, these are individuals who are professors in war studies, who have come out and said, if you look at the nature of what is happening, this is following all the templates of how civil war happens in a country. And we are building towards that situation. So deportations of illegal immigrants, and then there are literally, there could be as many as 2 to 3 million, I would say at least 2 million illegal immigrants in this country. There needs to be mass deportations of illegal immigrants. That's very popular across the country. And then we've introduced a policy called abolishing indefinite leave to remain. And what that is just very quickly, is that if a person comes in, they're not a British citizen, but if they've been here for 5 years, then they get something called indefinite leave to remain, right? Which means they're entitled to benefits and the social housing and government housing and so on.
Right.
We want to abolish that status. We believe that's an outdated status. And if you look at the situation, what's happening in Donald Trump, he's not just talking about deporting illegal immigrants. He's talking about people who are not compatible with American society. Now, he hasn't gone into specifics as to what that means, but it shows you how fast the level of debate is going. And people on the left will say, this is terrible. We know we have to stop this. My position is this: if you do not put the brakes on immigration and start implementing some form of deportation very, very quickly, and if you do not assert British identity as primary, you will get civil unrest that you've never seen before. So the left mentality is to just say suppress, deny, and censor, right? That's the left mentality. My position is, let's get policy implemented as quickly as possible to stop this influx so that we can calm down, settle, and be a one united society once again. That's my position.
We have come to a point where we wanted to get into the books and the books that you've written, but I think that's also going to take a break here for part 3, where we can't get into that. But I think in terms of politics, on a broader perspective, we have touched upon many things here. Is there anything else that you would like to add, or end this conversation?
Bringing back to the Mahabharata, just to make it clear. I mean, a lot of people, I understand there'll be a lot of Hindus on the left, and potentially even a lot of people from my own organization who are on the left, who will listen to what I'm saying, and they'll be like, but our guru teaches about love. God is about love. It's about compassion. And I want him to talk about Karna in the Mahabharata, right? So Karna is the son of Surya. So his natural samskara is to give. He's renowned for his charity. He never refuses anybody. Whatever they ask of him, he always gives it. But the problem is this: who does he serve? Does Karna serve Krishna on the battlefield, or does he serve Duryodhana? He serves Duryodhana. He fights for Duryodhana. And what this shows is compassion, real sympathy can be hijacked by the ego, Duryodhana. And when it's a false sense of compassion, and Karna he's a symbol of someone who is, yes, very generous and very heroic, but it's naive compassion that doesn't understand the bigger picture and the long-term trajectory of how things are going to pan out. And so what happens when the ego, Ahamkara, always wants short-term pleasure, wants short-term pleasure. So whenever you face a situation where you want to show compassion. If compassion is hijacked by the ego, it is always about short-termism. No, 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 we can't close the border. No, no, we can't deport these people. No, no, we can't. We have to give welfare. We have to do this. That's compassion. That's love. But what you don't understand is in the long term, in the grander picture of things, it's going to destroy everything. And so that is what wisdom, but viveka, discrimination, needs to be combined with compassion, not the ahamkara. And the radical left, and even some parts of the center left, allow them that their sense of compassion to be hijacked by short-termism, which is the ego. And that's what I want to bring out as really important when we deal with these kind of policies.
I think it's an amazing point, because I think people always get confused with compassion and naive compassion, because I think that's a very slippery road where people kind of can slip into very dangerous trajectories. And I think this is really amazing what you just described, because this is exactly where people usually I see people going wrong, which is compassion and naive compassion.
Yeah, and anyone who's a parent understands this. If you have a child that is spoilt because you keep giving in the name of short-term compassion, I don't want to hurt him, I don't want him to suffer, I don't want him to cry, he ends up becoming a terrible spoilt brat, right? And so any parent understands there must be discipline. Now, discipline can go too far, I understand it, but the more extreme a situation becomes, the more it needs to be matched in terms of the policy that you're going to implement. If a child becomes absolutely crazy and then spoiled, you need to be an ultra authoritarian and disciplined towards that child to get him on the right track. And it's the same with anything, with politics and everything.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think that's true in many things. And I think that's been an amazing conversation with you. I think even though we have less time, but we have touched into many things in this part. And I think we will be doing a part 3 where we will be talking about your books. I really hope that you had a great time on the show. And yeah, from me, that's all.
Great. Good to be with you. Thanks for asking me to come on.